I'll throw it your way. You can just say that. Good evening and welcome to the Monday, May 11th meeting of the Eden Prairie Planning Commission. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and be seated. Our first item on the agenda is, in fact, approval of the agenda. Are there any comments or changes to the agenda?
I'll move approval of the agenda.
Have a motion?
Second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Next item is the approval of the minutes from the Planning Commission held on Monday, April 27th, 2015. Does anybody have any changes, corrections, clarifications? Not hearing any.
Motion to accept the minutes. Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Okay, moving right along. We have one public hearing tonight. It is a variance by Lisa Ann Oster, JMB&A Kirtland trustee. The request is to permit a lot size of 1.26 acres. City code requires a lot size of 10 acres in the rural zoning district, and permit a side yard setback of less than 50 feet on one side and a combination of 150 feet for both side yards in the rural zoning district. The property is located at 9008 and 9010 Riley Lake Road. Would the proponent please come forward and present your project to us?
Thank you, commissioners and staff. I don't think this project probably rises to the level of a PowerPoint presentation, and before you all breathe your sigh of relief, I do have one handout. My family bought the property at 9010 and 9008 Riley Lake Road in 1951. And for 64 years, we have spent every summer there. It included a summer cabin. It's not winterized. It's not inhabitable over the winter. It's not insulated. But we have enjoyed every summer there for 64 years. Given that the cabin was about 125 years old when my parents bought it, it is showing its age. It's weak. It's deteriorating. It needs some extensive repair. The electrical is probably, I believe, the original wiring that was put in when electricity was brought in. The structure is sinking. I don't frankly think it could withstand being jacked up to put another foundation under it. We would like to regretfully demolish the cabin, but we would like to joyfully build a permanent home there that we could live at. It would be my retirement home. We looked at the option, we tried very hard to fit a cabin into the 9010 lot, but it's a fairly narrow lot and it was infeasible to draw a house that would fit on that lot. So we approached the city about joining the two lots. We were told that we must rezone in order to build because it is currently zoned rural, and then in order to rezone we had to replat. We started that process in October. We met with the city in October 31st, and we started that process as soon as possible. But they requested all of our housing plans and our engineering plans and our grading plans, which we weren't quite understanding because we were just trying to draw the two lots together. We weren't even talking about a house at that time. 6 months later, nothing had progressed. let me back up. In October, we mentioned that according to city code, it said that for a project of our size, the city manager could approve it. But we were told at that time that the city manager would just refer it back to the process that we were under, which was the whole Chapter 12 subdivision code, which we maintained we should not be subjected to because we weren't subdividing. Nonetheless, we were told that's what we had to do, and that's what we proceeded with. 6 months later, we were called into a meeting and said, well, you actually have two options. So while we didn't know what happened in the preceding 6 months, we were given two options, one of which was combining the property, one of which, again, was replatting and rezoning. A week after that, due to some support from community citizens, the city manager asked to meet with us. We met with the city manager and with the city planning director, and we were given a third option, which was to combine the two lots, keep it rural, which meant we didn't have to replat, but request the variance. And that's exactly what we're doing tonight. While we do want to do that, I take responsibility for the fact that we maybe didn't have the big picture, and we should have also asked for a variance at that time for not moving further back from the lake. We're currently 65 feet back from the lake, and planning requires 100 feet. However, we're also 40 feet high. So if the 100 feet is for flooding issues, I think the 40 feet high should offset some of that issue. So with Regina's advice, we're asking for you to approve what we're asking for tonight, plus a continuance to get a variance on the setback from the lake.
Okay.
If we do get the variance on the setback from the lake, we're going to save a lot of trees. When we first met with the builder, we had two requirements. One was to maintain the ambience of the cabin. The second was to minimize the loss of trees. We have two lots. Our second lot is heavily wooded. For years and years, well, since my parents bought it, it had abutted the Westminster Heights Church Camp, which was heavily wooded, and to us, this was our little slice of heaven. It was our woods, and we now just have that one lot. We want to maintain that feel of a cabin, of a retreat, and building closer to the lake would allow us to help advance that.
Okay. Thank you. Why don't we let city staff brief us on their perspective,
Sure.
and if we have questions for you,
Thank you.
we'll talk to you again. Regina, you want to fill us in on the staff report?
Thank you, Chair Kirk and members of the Commission. Prior to this meeting just a few minutes ago, Ms. Oster asked if, based off of a potential new location of the house to save trees and to save some of the natural features of the lot, if they could take some more time to develop a plan that would meet that intent, again, to save trees and to preserve the sloped area of the property. In doing so, based off of what Ms. Oster described, the setback to the ordinary high water level or the shoreline setback to the lake would be approximately 64 to 65 feet as described. Now that would require a variance. We did not publish for that variance, so it would be staff's recommendation to request a continuance of this meeting to the next available June meeting to allow time for staff and for the applicant to work together to finalize that location for the shoreline setback, and then actually bring all three of those requests in one package to you at the same night, so you can fully evaluate all the requests together.
I concur with that recommendation. I think it would be better to look at the entire package at once I don't think there's any detriment to that. Maybe, Ms. Oster, would that be an issue with you? I think one way or the other, you'd have to come back here to another meeting, and I think it would be better for us to look at the complete package all at once. If you could come forward, please. We're recorded, so it's important to...
We had originally had a high sense of urgency in that this house was to be handicapped accessible, safe home for my father, who has just recently passed away.
Sorry.
So we do have the time to review, which is why we're looking at a revised house plan. Yes, we can do that. I certainly was hoping to at least make some progress and maybe having the first two parts approved tonight, but if that is your recommendation, we'll certainly accept that.
Thank you for that. I think it's just best to look at the entire package in one picture, and I don't think it would have any impact on decision-making, whether it be done now or later, so.
May I just ask, what is my next step? We're not obviously professional developers, so
No,
what is the next step? Do I meet with you?
Regina, do you want to address that?
The next step would be that we would continue the meeting tonight to the next available meeting, which would be June 8th. And we, as a city staff, would republish the request, and we would include the request for the shoreline setback. So from 100 feet, which code requires, to 64
Right.
or 65
So you're
feet.
you're requiring nothing more from me until that time?
That would be fine, nothing more.
Okay, thank you. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions or comments relative to this kind of change in approach for this project?
May I? Mr. Chair.
Please.
First of all, I'm thrilled at the news to maybe look at a new house plan. I had reviewed the plan and had some conflicted feelings about this proposal. So I think it would maybe help you and maybe hear the other commissioners' responses to what we thought we were going to see tonight, and that could possibly help put you on a path. One of the immediate things that we noticed, or I noticed personally, was in terms of tree replacement and the tree ordinance. Okay, so you're proposing, there was like 459 caliper inches that you're taking down, and the math was done by your landscape architect. And over 80% of those trees were good quality red oaks, and the other were red maples. Fine specimen trees you have on your lot. It's a beautiful property. I saw it myself. And our tree replacement ordinance does say that they should be replaced with like-kind trees, but on your landscape plan, the selection of the trees was deferred until later, when it was stated, I think, on your plan that you were going to then select from our chosen list of trees allowed in the ordinance. I think that due to the high quality of what you're removing, there could be an attempt to provide some assurances that you're going to be replacing with like-kind trees when you come back. I think that would go a long way. May I continue, or would you like to take turns?
Go ahead.
Okay. There's a shoreland ordinance in place, and I'm sure staff made you aware of the shoreland ordinance and the impacts to that. Your contours, while I shouldn't use the word steep, but they don't qualify as either a bluff or a steep slope in either one of the definitions on our ordinance, but nonetheless, it's rather dramatically changing topography and contours around the lake, and it's a dramatic land alteration that you're undertaking. About 2/3 or 3/4 of your property is being fully graded, not clear cut, but graded, and substantial tree loss and a change of grading. And there are a few points in the shoreland ordinance of ours that actually addresses views to the lake for the enjoyment of the view for the property owner, but limit the amount of tree loss. They talk about being selective in their pruning as opposed to just a clear cut. So I might encourage you to have further conversations with staff or maybe the city forester about that, and walk the property and make sure that we find a balance between you enjoying the lake views versus what's in the ordinance in terms of preserving from the lakeside back towards your property a substantial enjoyment of the natural view around the coast of the lake.
Thank you.
Okay? I'm going to stop there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Travis, you have a,
Do you want to just go down the line, or should we
we can do
kind
that.
of go out of order? I have several questions or concerns that would be related to some legislative things that are going, or at least in bill form in this session, and also our ordinary hair water line, or our shoreline overlay district. So speaking to that point, I'll start with the shoreline overlay district, and her request for the proponent's request for a variance from the 100-foot. My question would be, what is the Department of Natural Resources guidelines? I thought they had kind of did a revamping of their guidelines to 75-foot, if I remember, or maybe it was even less than that from the ordinary high water line. And the question would be, to what purpose is ours ordinances more restrictive than what is kind of statewide in a recreational development lake? I'm kind of fuzzy on that, and maybe you could elaborate a little bit on that before I move on.
The last shoreline ordinance that was adopted in our current city code was reflective of DNR standards. They pretty much mirror each other. So if there was new legislation that I'm unaware of, that's certainly something that we can look into between now and the continued meeting date. Our code does require for this type of lake, which is a recreational development water, a 100-foot setback from the ordinary high water level that's determined by the DNR. Now, we do also have a provision in our code that talks about if there are structures on either side of the property that essentially, and I'm kind of summarizing, but essentially the property in the middle, the Oster's property, could actually be 88 feet without requesting any variance from city code. The average is 88 between the two properties on either side. But I'd certainly, prior to bringing this forward, we'll certainly take a look at the DNR regulations to see if they've changed from what we have adopted. If they have changed, then we certainly need to make some changes to our current code, and that would be evaluated.
Yeah, I thought I remember a conversation several years back. It was related to a wetland ordinance update, or maybe it was just a fully enactment of a new wetland code. Well, no, it was a modification of our wetland code. And I think I remember the conversation coming up as there was new legislation, the DNR recommended procedures for ordinances being adopted by local municipalities. And I remember it being less restrictive than what we were, but that wasn't the scope of what we were conversing in a code change at that time. It was kind of, we kicked the can down the road until something came up. Well, this obviously has come up, and it might be prudent to revisit that idea and see if we are in conformance with the latest DNR, or if we could become conforming with it, and what kind of benefits or detriments would that be to this specific property, and if that could be something that would, I mean, we could go forward with the property, and assuming that we were going to go forward with a code change in the near future. I don't know, that would be something that the Development Review Committee could probably discuss about and then come back to us on June 8th or whatever day it is.
We'll certainly do the research and provide an update for you.
The second point was to the House and Senate bills that are going through right now. It's part of a, well, I have them right here actually, and as they were proposed, and they're stuck in committee right now, but providing for riparian buffers, and what kind of benefit or detriment does this lot and other riparian and littoral properties have that are within the municipality? Now, I think perhaps Metro Storm sewer system, those that are on public sewer and public water might be classified as different. This probably is more tailored towards the rural area, like the non-urban area, but if we're maintaining, or if it's the position that we're maintaining a rural zoning, how does this that may or may not go into effect affect the property? So that would be something that I would like to know for next meeting too.
Again, I think,
The applicant is proposing to hook up to sewer as part of this process. So it would be, the property would be connected to sewer, and it is currently hooked up to water services. But we can certainly provide more. of
No,
an
yeah,
update
I
for
read
you.
that they were going to be connecting up to municipal sewer and water, or already water, connecting to municipal sewer. The question was on the rural aspect, because that was one of the options that was in front of us, maintaining rural and getting a variance and doing administrative authority on that. The question is the rural zoning nature of it, and I don't know how they're going to debate this down at St. Paul and what they're going to do as classifications on stuff, but I would hate to go forward with something and then it would be a detriment for them knowing that this is down the pipeline, or could be. So a little more research as to what the effect would be on this and other properties that would be in the city.
interesting comments. Any other?
I just have one comment about what Commissioner has just raised. Is there an effective date for that statute for it to pass?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, as it was proposed, and now it's in, well, let's see here. The last I printed this off, it was in the Environment and Natural Resources Policy and Finance Committee in the legislature, and then in the Senate it's in the Environment and Energy Committee. Jobs, Agriculture, and Rural Development Committee. And it had a effective date. Let's see if I can find it here quickly for you. Final enactment, if I can think of final enactment. Well, okay, the legislative side doesn't have a final enactment date. I thought I remember something in the Senate having a, I guess it's somewhere in 2016 is what my guess would be. Initial proposed maps must be prepared by April 1st, 2016, and that's by the Commissioner of Natural Resources. And then there's a comment period after that, so it'd be sometime later in 2016.
So
That
just-
is if it goes forward. Now, there's been some latest news that I remember reading in the last couple of weeks of Star Tribune and others that there's some controversy about this, so it may end up just being tabled. So I don't know.
Yeah, just to summarize, the issue you're bringing up is there a potential detriment to the rural zoning versus a residential zoning relative to the potential of a ordinance or a law such as is being proposed?
Yeah, correct. I know one of the exemptions is anything that's connected to MS4 system, which I would assume would be us. We're part of the MS4 system. But the nature of the zoning of rural, I don't know if that will create a strange legalese that we might have to deal with down the road on other riparian and littoral type properties. There might be it's a handful that I am guessing. This would be one of them, but at a cursory level, it doesn't look like this affects it. This legislation, which is still in bill form, affects the property, but I'd like to know what ensued complications could arise down the road, since this is coming in front of us.
There's an interesting challenge for you, Regina. Any other comments? I mean, this is kind of you're getting the insight from the Planning Commission here on some of our preliminary thoughts, so it's a good opportunity.
So just by way of process, we're looking at an administrative combination and then asking for 2 variances, well, now 3. Or the flip side is we could look to rezone it residential and there'd be no variances. Why are we choosing the former?
The applicant does have 2 choices. They could have gone through a rezoning and replat process. The other option was to request variances from city code, which as an applicant they chose. Initially, as the applicant described, it was staff's initial recommendation to replat the property and rezone the property as well. However, as members of the public, they do have a choice. And they did choose the variance request. Now, if the variance is approved, there may be challenges in the future if they want to add on to their, let's say the variance is approved, they build their house in the location, and then they decide they want to do an addition on their property or add a swimming pool to their property. And that may not meet setback requirements in the rural zoning district. So then they would have to come forward to the Planning Commission again and make that request. So in the short term, the process is shorter. In the long term, it may put more encumbrances on the property and more process in the future, not only for this property owner, or should they sell in the future to a future property owner.
One more follow-up. Is there any tax difference between something zoned rural or zoned residential?
I'm not aware. I'd have to come back with an answer unless either of the other two staff members know. No. I'd have to come back with an answer for you.
Okay, so we've kind of put some issues on the table, given the proponent a little more insight into the thinking of the commission. Any last thoughts that you want to share?
Mr. Chair, if I may, as long as Mr. Fox is here, circle back on the issue of trees, just on one maybe minor point. As it relates to the tree replacement plan, I noted that the lot is fully forested now, and while the obligations to document significant trees only have a minimum caliper inches and above for their quantity of trees on the property, the location of their replacement stock is nested within undisturbed areas of what I would classify as fully mature forested areas. And I question the ability of those trees to grow, thrive to what normally would be expected. Is it your opinion that there could be properties where replacement trees can't find a home properly due to the other vegetation on site, and that's a limiting factor in the development? Or do you have any other concerns about new trees planted in a forest?
Mr. Chair and members of the commission, obviously this is a difficult site. The one thing I can tell you is that either myself or my forest technician are fully qualified to help them select trees that would fit out there. This site technically is a big woods. It has sugar maple in it. It has a few scattered red oaks, has some bur oaks. Any replacement trees would have to be shade tolerant if you're going to put them in that canopy. So for instance, some of the evergreens, unless they get at least 8 hours of sunlight, they won't survive. But certainly you could go with hemlock, you could go with some of the balsam firs that would be better in an understory scenario. The other thing I guess you have to realize is the placement of the house is going to reduce a significant amount of canopy cover towards the lakeside, which would then introduce lateral light underneath the current canopy. So that gives you a potential for introducing small trees that are shade tolerant to acclimate to that site and then to basically grow and develop. So it's a complex question, but it's not one that you can't, through proper selection and proper placement, overcome.
Thank you. I think your wisdom could be helpful to the applicant as they retool their application. Appreciate that.
Travis.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I do have another question. We've been looking at the combining of the lots, and that is something that the proponent has been looking to achieve. At present, what are the individual lot widths that we would have stipulations that in the ordinances that would require various setbacks and stuff like that? What are they individually?
I believe they're on your handout. One is 80 and one is 105, I think.
Okay, yeah, I see it, 84.3 and 109.3. Okay, so that's at the shoreline. Is that how, when we angular them along the shoreline, is that how the ordinance would read, or do we do perpendicular to the side yard? on an individual basis?
On an individual basis, it would be perpendicular to the side yard.
So what would those figures be then? That could, you don't have to tell me right now, but that is something that, you know, you could bring forward at the next meeting. Because that was something that she had mentioned, that the combination, it would be difficult to build two structures. I'm trying to see that difficulty there. I mean, I can see it's going to be difficult, but I'm just trying to see.
In the rural zoning district, side yard setbacks are 50 feet for one side and a combination of 150 feet for both sides. So once you place any structure, whether it's on one lot or the other or in the middle, you're going to have that difficulty of meeting setback requirements if you keep the zoning as rural.
So that was assuming the maintaining of the rural zoning
Correct.
system, okay.
Okay. Any other issues we want to put on the table? We're not solving problems today, we're more introducing opportunities, let's say. If not, then I am open to a motion for a continuance.
Mr. Chair, go ahead. Mr. Chair, recommend to move to recommend a continuance to the June 8th, 2015 meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a continuance. I'd just like to note, as Regina said earlier, that we will be republishing the hearing notice for this meeting, including the third variance. And so, if there's no other discussion, all in favor of the motion to continue, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passed. So we'll see you in a few weeks, and I would suggest perhaps at least some consultation with staff and for moving forward, but a very interesting project in a beautiful part of the city.
Thank you very much. We've enjoyed it for 64 years. Hope to enjoy it for
So that is our last and last public hearing for the night. So moving on, planners' reports. Regina, you have anything to enlighten us with?
Just a reminder that the Boards and Commission banquet is on Wednesday night, begins at 6 p.m. I'm sure most of you have RSVP'd already, and I will not be there, but I'm sure Julie will be excited to see you there.
Yep, highly recommended. It's an enjoyable evening. Moving to members' reports. Community Advisory Committee.
I'm waiting till the next meeting when our other commissioner who's on that committee is here. So.
Good. Do we have any continuing business? New business? If not, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Meeting adjourned.